Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the AME Food Testing Show. Today's guest is Zack Kaldveer, Assistant Media Director at the Yes on Prop 37 campaign in California. Today's topic is GMO food labeling, California's Proposition 37. Zack is the Assistant Media Director for the Yes on Proposition 37 campaign. He formerly served as both the Communications Director for the Consumer Federation of California, a nonprofit consumer rights and economic justice organization, and editor of the California Progress Report, an independent online journal that covers a wide range of vital public policy issues. Zack has nearly 15 years of experience working on a diverse range of social, environmental, and economic justice issues, including privacy rights, civil liberties, election integrity, corporate accountability, peace, and nuclear non-proliferation, climate change, transportation, and ecological sustainability. Zack received his bachelor's degree from the University of California at San Diego in communications and a master's degree at San Diego State, also in communications. We would now like to welcome Zack to our program and now allow him to update us on his current activities. Zack?
Hey, Andy. Thanks a lot for having me, and thanks for the introduction. I think that about says it all, and I think that pretty much defines why I'm working on this campaign, because it really epitomizes the continued struggle to protect the public interest that's under kind of assault by corporate power in this country, and Prop 37 really represents this struggle in a powerful way.
Well, Zack, you're clearly a social justice advocate. What is the issue behind genetically modified food?
Well, genetically modified foods, just for people that are not familiar with the topic, because unfortunately most people aren't, because we don't give it any attention in this country. But genetically engineered foods are plants or animals that have had their DNA artificially altered by genes from other plants, animals, viruses, or bacteria. Now, this type of genetic modification occurs in a laboratory and thus cannot be found in nature. And that's why it's called a genetically modified organism and not a genetically modified food, though a lot of the people, we call it genetically modified foods just because that's a little simpler. Now, an example, for instance, is this new corn that Walmart is going to be selling that has a Bt toxin inside the corn itself. Now, this is different than in the past when GE corn prior to this was used in processed food for the most part. Now we're talking about corn that has an insecticide inside it, and that insecticide disintegrates the linings of the stomach of insects. Now, we have no idea what this may or may not do to people, because in our country we don't require any study of the health effects of GMOs, nor have there been any long-term studies done. So and of course, this is the real part about Prop 37. We don't even get to know whether our food has been genetically modified. There is no labeling requirements in America, so we can even make a choice whether we want to eat that corn. And this is very different than now 50 countries around the world, including even Russia and China, that do require such labeling. So Proposition 37 simply would require a label, not a warning label, just a label just like you have with sugar, calories, fat, and 3,000 other ingredients that require labeling in our country. It would simply say, this has been genetically modified.
So let me ask you a question, Zack. Is genetically modified food beneficial or harmful to humans?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? Because, as I said before, our FDA has, for 20 years now, refused to require any safety studying of GMO foods. Similarly, there has been no long-term study. So the actual effects on human beings is very much in doubt. However, there have been numerous independent studies that are raising concerns. There has been a study in Canada that showed that 93% of pregnant women had a component of the Bt toxin in their bloodstream. There was a study that showed this Bt toxin caused liver damage in rats. There's a great study by Michael Hansen of Consumers Union, which also is the organization that puts out Consumer Reports, a highly respected magazine that goes through a whole list of reasons why labeling should be required in this country, and all the reasons why we should have doubts about the effects of GMOs on human beings. This is particularly when it comes to allergies and allergenic responses. And, over the last 20 years, allergy problems with people with allergies has gone multiple times up. And that's exactly the time when we started using GMO products. Now, do we know that there's a direct connection? No, we don't. But that's partly because we have no labeling, so we can't know, and we don't require any testing, so we can't know. So labeling is really a first step in at least starting to give people their fundamental democratic right to be able to know what's in their food and what they feed their children.
Excellent.
And let me add to
summary.
that. And let me add to that. There are not just problems with GMOs in terms of possible human health effects, but there's a lot of unintended consequences. Since we started using GMOs, pesticide use has increased. Similarly, cross-pollination has gone into farmers who are trying to do right, trying to grow natural and organic foods, and the GMOs have contaminated their farms. Similarly, the use of GMOs has increased what are called super bugs and super weeds that continually, as nature does, adapt to these new chemicals and then find ways to survive them. And then we have to use new pesticides, new chemicals to destroy them. So we're kind of caught in this dangerous cycle. And Prop 37 simply suggests that by the very least, people should know if their food has been genetically engineered in a laboratory and spliced with a bacteria or a virus. That's not too much to ask.
So I'm going to address this question to you formally. Why should GMO food be labeled? If you can repeat that for our audience. And don't forget, our audience is primarily food production managers, food quality managers, food safety managers, and food security managers.
Well, I think it goes straight to this fundamental right that the consumer should have to know what's in the food we eat and feed our children so we can make informed choices. I mean, informed choice is, one of the bedrocks of a free market system, a functioning free market system. And food labels already list calories and fat and allergy information and other ingredients. So all this measure requires is that consumers be able to see if the food has been genetically engineered so they can make an informed choice. Having tools to know what you're buying is a good thing. Information is power, and that power belongs in the hands of consumers. And, I would add to any food producers out there, if you have labeling, I would imagine that if you're shopping in a grocery store and on one hand you have corn that has a Bt toxin that has been untested that disintegrates the stomach lines of insects in it, and then on the other stand you have corn that was grown naturally by a farmer, you're going to choose that corn. And so food producers will do well to avoid GMOs. But this, of course, is not, this is not the intent. The intent is just to give people that choice. But similar with the tomatoes, if you're at a store and a consumer knows that one tomato has been spliced with a frog gene and the other tomato has been grown locally by a organic farmer, they're going to choose, I would imagine, the naturally grown tomato. So this is really about consumer choice and an informed citizenry. And I would hope that food producers and farmers will realize that that's the future. People are more and more concerned about their health, about the health of their children, and if they know that these giant corporations are literally fundamentally changing the DNA of our food supply, and those studies are being done, they're going to want to know. And when they do know, they're going to make more informed choices and choose more natural foods. That certainly would be my guess.
Excellent summary, Zack. What is the status currently in the United States on GMO food labeling, other than Prop 37 proposals?
Well, we're way behind the rest of the world. I mean, way behind. As I said, there are about 50 countries in the world that now require labeling of GMOs, and that includes all of Europe. It includes, like I said, China and Russia. We don't even. Not only do we not require labeling, but as I said, the FDA has said we're not going to study it. We trust Monsanto. We trust DuPont. And Monsanto, interestingly enough, one of their former communications directors was on record as saying, we don't have to vouch for the safety of our foods. That's the FDA's job. And then the FDA's official policy is we don't have to vouch for the safety of the food. That's the company's job. So where does that leave a mom in the supermarket trying to make healthy choices for her kids?
Excellent ideas. Here's what I offer to you as a suggestion. If you could conceptualize the importance of food labeling, and for our audience, does Proposition 37 in California actually advance the consumerism, in other words, the choice that people will have in California?
Well, I mean, it absolutely will advance the choice, because right now we are really serving as guinea pigs for a massive GMO study on the health effects on human beings. But without labeling, we can't even determine what those effects are, because we can't trace back if someone has an allergenic response, whether it was caused by a genetically modified food or not. So I would say that the reason why the opponents of this measure, which consists largely of pesticide and junk food corporations that have already put in $25 million to defeat this measure, that happens to be more money than any initiative in the country has received, and in fact, more money has been given just to the No campaign than all other initiatives in the rest of the states combined. So that gives you an idea of just how afraid these companies are of what might happen if people know what they're doing to the food supply. So this is about as fundamental a consumer issue and a consumer choice issue as we can have. And I would add that, why are they so afraid? Why are they putting so much money into defeating this proposition, which simply requires one little line of ink? I mean, look at food packaging now. There's labels all over it. They're constantly putting new labels to try to entice you to buy the product. Lower fat, no MSG, low in sodium. Now they're trying to say that adding one line of ink is just a huge burden. Well, that's ridiculous. Clearly, they're afraid of what people will do when they can make more informed choices. And what that means is then you'll have more natural and organic food producers, truly natural, that can compete on an equal playing field. Right now, they're at a disadvantage because a lot of these corporations that are using GMO products are claiming that they're natural. And consumers have no idea which are and which aren't. So I think that's what they're afraid of. That's why they're spending so much money to defeat us.
Well, Zack, that's a great point. What kind of documentation will companies need to submit to prove that they comply with Proposition 37 in GMO labeling?
Well, that's a good question, because one of the scare tactics the other side has been using is trying to say this is going to be this huge burden on businesses and food processors, food producers. But actually, Prop 37 is written in a really business-friendly way. It actually does not require them to prove or to test that their food has been, if their food has been genetically modified or not. What it requires is that farmers have to have the intent that if their intention is not to use GMOs, then that's what they have to say. And it would be up to people to hold the companies accountable if they deceive the consumer. Now, there's no reason to believe that these companies are going to try to deceive, just like they don't on other kinds of ingredients that they have to label. So it's really an easy process for them to abide by. This is actually different than Europe. That they claim oftentimes that our standard here in California, Prop 37, is going to be too tough. It actually makes it easier for them.
Well, Zach, I don't know if you know this, but I worked for a company that did DNA testing. That's essentially what you're asking in a roundabout way, is for companies to engage a surveillance program and then report on the labeling to consumers prior to purchase the result of a test. And that's the comparison of what would be called a pattern DNA versus an altered DNA. Yeah, that is a challenge in some levels, but in other levels it's a very rudimentary protocol. So who endorses Prop 37?
Well, we have over 1,000 businesses and groups that go from lots of family farms and organic farmers, but also groups like the California League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, CalPERG, the California Nurses Association. The list goes on and on. I mean, really what you have is on one side you have groups that have a long history in public interest advocacy on issues like protecting people's health, protecting the environment, protecting small farmers. And then on the other side, you have a who's who in pesticide, chemical, agribusiness, and the Grocery Manufacturers Association as well. So I think voters have to go, whose side am I on? Who do I trust when I go into that voting booth? Who is better to decide what I buy and what I feed my children? Those pesticide companies or myself? And the companies that are opposing and bankrolling the no on 37 side, they have a long history that should cast a lot of doubt on anything that they say. I mean, for instance, Monsanto has given the most money so far to the no side, $4.2 million. This is the same company that created Agent Orange and said it was safe. DuPont has given $4 million alone to the no on 37 side. This is the company that said DDT was safe. And the no on 37 campaign is largely being run by the same kind of consultants and lobbying firms that have worked on for the tobacco lobby. So these guys have have a long history of deceiving the public for corporate profit.
Fascinating. So you've outlined who endorses Prop 37, who opposes it, and you're saying that their funding follows those same sort of mentalities and theories. So what advice can you give a voter in California and in sort of a shadow way, the potential other propositions that could pop up in other states when they go into the voting booth and they look at your proposition and read it?
Well, I think it really goes back to do you trust yourself when you're making choices in the grocery store for what you're going to eat and what you're going to feed your children? Or would you rather be left in the dark based on the claims of companies like the pesticide industry and Monsanto and DuPont who also told us that, Agent Orange and DDT was safe. I mean, this really comes down to whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. Polling has shown that 90% of Americans, when asked, do you believe genetically modified foods should be labeled, say yes. So when the FDA was taking a petition about what people across the country thought about this issue, they received 1 million petitions, the most they've ever received on any issue ever, saying, yes, we want labeling. And then, for instance, getting Prop 37 on the ballot. Oftentimes, propositions that get on the ballot in California are done so because they're bankrolled by paid petitioners, paid for by corporate interests to get something on the ballot that will try to increase their profit margins. Prop 37 is the antithesis of that process. It was started by a grandmother farmer who came up with the idea that we need labeling of these food products so consumers can better understand what they're buying when they're in the store. She started petition gathering, and within 10 weeks, 1 million signatures were turned in to the Secretary of State's office. That's double what's required to get a measure on the ballot. So I think when voters are in that booth, they've got to think, am I with Monsanto and the pesticide industry and the junk food industry, or am I with small farmers, health groups, environmental groups, public interest groups? And more than that, do you think you have the right to know what's in the food that you buy? I mean, it's really that simple. It's about the right to know what you're eating and what you're feeding your children. There's nothing more democratic than that, and I think that's why the 90% of Americans agree, because this really is not a partisan issue. Republicans are the first to want a functioning free market, and that means you need to have consumer choice, and therefore have a level playing field for companies to compete. And of course, Democrats care a lot about what these pesticides are doing to the environment, what they're doing to small farmers, and are concerned about what the veracity of what a lot of these companies are saying about the safety of their products when they have a long track record of lying about them.
Zack, those are all salient issues that we need to think about when we're in the polling booth. What about when we're at the cash register? I've been to the grocery store recently, and $100 doesn't buy you much. Will this GMO labeling reduce the amount of substantive food we can buy with our resources?
No, absolutely not. There are certainly not everyone can afford purely organic food, but this would not change that. I mean, we just had a study done by Joanna Shepard Bailey out of Emory University, professor of School of Law, that did a really in-depth study of what this proposition would cost, or not cost, I should say, consumers. And she found that there would likely be no cost increase whatsoever in groceries for Californians, and by the most, about $0.10 a month. And that would only be for the first year, when the companies would have to add the label. And the reason being is the Proposition 37 would give companies 18 months to put this one extra line of ink on their label. That's the time that they normally change their label anyway. And as I said earlier, just go to the store and you see labels all over the place for everything. So there is no additional cost. Like I said, by the most for 1 year, it would be the cost of a gumball a month to consumers. So this will not raise prices for the average consumer. It will simply make them more informed.
Okay, Zack, let's look on the other side. Again, our audience is primarily made up of people that are in charge of making food and making sure it's safe. Will the smaller operators be unusually burdened? I mean, they have a lot of stuff to worry about already. They have their higher costs. They're looking at increased healthcare costs. They're looking at a lot of things that are basically putting them out of business. Will the GMO labeling put them out of business?
No, absolutely not. And in fact, that's why so many small farmers support this measure. See, one of the things that Prop 37 makes clear is the intent issue. And one of the problems that a lot of small farmers will attest to is they're trying to grow crops that are natural or are organic. And then their crops get infected by GMO crops nearby, and that can be passed on by bees or by wind. Now, these farmers would not get penalized under Prop 37 if, for instance, they said, we do not grow genetically modified foods, and then it turned out there was some that found in their food because it wasn't their intent to do it. It was not their fault. So small farmers would be exempt as long as they're not intentionally misleading or deceiving the public, which is fair. I mean, corporations should be accountable for deceiving the public just like human beings are accountable when they break the law. But the average farmer that just wants to grow natural crops will not be hurt by this because as long as it's not their intent, they're not intentionally using GMO products and then not telling.
Very good, Zach. All of the food producers pretty much know the old horrible stories and the incidents of being tested by an independent tester and unintentionally being discovered to have a GMO product, and then these giant companies suing them for millions of dollars and them going out of business.
Right.
There's sort of a consolidation effort on some of these mega corporations. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, and in fact, you touched on one of the great ironies of the No on 37 campaign's arguments that they're so afraid of these giant mega-billion multinational corporations are afraid of lawsuits from people if Prop 37 passes, when in fact they are the great suers of all time, but they're suing small farmers. Prop 37 is very careful for exactly the reason you're talking about. We absolutely are aware that a lot of farmers unintentionally have their crops contaminated, and they would be absolutely exempt from any penalty under Prop 37.
Very good. Well, Zach, you have been an excellent interviewee today. I'd like to allow you some time to summarize your remarks, offer your suggestions to both the food managers that we've addressed, and I guess the consumers and voters in general in California.
Well, I hope voters really just ask themselves some simple questions. Do you want to know what's being done to the food supply, particularly when we're talking about food that is being genetically engineered in a laboratory without your knowledge, without study, without your consent, and then without you even knowing which foods are done this way and which aren't? And when you ask yourself that question, then you have to ask yourself, so should there be labeling so you at least can make a decision on your own? If you don't have a problem with it, then you can you can stack your shelves with every GMO product in the market, and there are going to be plenty of them. This Prop 37 doesn't ban anything. It doesn't even use a warning label on anything. It's simply adding one more piece of information for your average consumer in the store. So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing I would ask is, just remember who is representing the No on 37 side. And, these are the same people that fought against having country of origin labeling on products. They're the same companies that fought against getting junk food out of school vending machines. These are the same companies that fought banning BPA, a very toxic chemical, from food products and in fact, baby products here in California. When I was with the Consumer Federation of California, I worked on, and we finally passed it this last year, getting BPA, bisphenol, out of these kinds of food packaging and actually out of baby products because of all the damage that it caused. And these same players lobbied for years and years and spent millions and millions of dollars to prevent that. And the same thing with another good example here in California was the fast food restaurant menu labeling that's now required. A lot of the same players fought tooth and nail, saying the exact same things. If you require calories and fat at fast food restaurants, prices will go up. Well, now you go into a fast food restaurant chain, and you see the fat and calories. Nothing has changed. So just remember the record of who is saying what, and when you go into that voting booth, and just remember these companies don't care about your health or your wallet. They care about making profit, and so I would just urge you and urge every voter to take power back by demanding labeling on their food. And I think for food makers and food processors, know that the consumers are increasingly more aware of health issues. They're more concerned about the food that they eat, and they feed their children. So I think it bodes well for them to move in that direction as well.
Well, Zack, I have to agree with you on that. Yesterday I was with a major food producer, and their feeling was that if they can get a label, and it's a different issue, but the same sort of concept, if they can get a label that will increase their market share and give them an advantage over other competitors, they're willing to engage it. Do you feel that a Prop 37 label on a food product will increase the market share for just about any food producer?
Well, I would imagine that some people won't pay any attention to the labels, as they don't now to fat or calorie content. I think a lot of people will, and that means that organic and natural foods will do better than they currently are because there'll be greater transparency. I mean, there's got to be a reason that all these chemical and pesticide and junk food corporations are pouring record amounts of money this year into defeating this just basic labeling measure. And it's because they must fear that people will start making a different choice if they're given that choice. Like I said, whether it's the corn or the tomato example. So I think there's a real opportunity for any farmer, any food producer out there that wants to move to more natural or organic ingredients, that they could see their businesses expand, and we could see a more healthy population as well. And we can start to link just what the health effects of GMOs might be better, because if we have labeling, we can start connecting dots and understanding what the long-term effects are.
Well, Zack, again, I'd like to thank you for your participation today and your energy. It's been very positive energy. I haven't heard anything negative, and I think that your team offers an excellent perspective on the potentiality for adding good in society. What can people do to support your movement?
Well, the first thing I would say is go to the California Right to Know website, sign up to get our alerts. One of the great things about our campaign, and once again that distinguishes us from the No on 37 side, is we literally have an army of energized volunteers across the state, because we're going to be outspent 10-1 in this contest. We don't have corporate backers. One of the interesting things about the No on 37 side is of the $25 million that they have already dumped into defeating this basic right-to-know labeling measure, not a single dollar can be traced to a human being. Every single dollar has been given by a couple handfuls of giant corporate interests. We, on the other hand, are funded by lots and lots of donors and people. And we have a big grassroots workforce out there doing everything they can to get this really right-to-know message out there. So I would urge people to go to our site. We just came out with our first TV ad. It's on the homepage of our website. I hope people would check that out, because it does connect this whole Monsanto and Agent Orange and DuPont to DDT and the ties to tobacco of our opponents really well. and go to our Facebook page, and just get active and just be aware and just kind of spread the word. I think our greatest advantage against corporate money is organized and energized people. And our other great advantage is the very simplicity of our message, which is the right to know what's in the food we eat and feed our children, period. That's all we are asking.
Well, I'll have to say that I'm very impressed again with your energy and vitality. What's the potentiality of the Proposition 37 actually passing?
Well, I think we have a good chance of winning this because intuitively, a lot of voters are going to go into that booth, probably not knowing a lot about this issue, but you go into that booth and you ask yourself that question, do I deserve to have a label? Just one extra label so people can make an informed choice, whether you don't care about GMOs or not. So I think we have that going for us, and that's demonstrated by the 90% of Americans and Californians that were polled when they're asked that question. Now, of course, we're going to be bombarded by up to $50 million of negative TV ads bankrolled by Monsanto and DuPont and the pesticide industry in the next couple months. So we're not, we're very aware of what's coming and the kinds of propaganda and scare tactics that they're going to use. And I think the most recent poll done had us around 69%, 65% support, and around 21, 22% opposition. So I think we're in a good spot, we're in a strong spot, but this bombardment of negative ads is coming from them, and we're going to need all hands on deck. And that means organized people is the only thing that's ever beat organized money, and that's what we're going to count on.
Well, let me ask you, Zack, and I'll close with this. If I were not living in California, living in a state other than California or even another country, because we have many international listeners, what could they do to engage this same type of legislative action where they live?
Well, part of the problem has been in legislatures across the state and on the federal level, because of the amount of money and influence of these giant corporations like Monsanto and DuPont, they have been able to beat back any legislative efforts to label these products. Plus, they use the threat of lawsuits because they say, if this is our intellectual property, you have no right to access it. So it's very difficult to get this through the legislature. But one of the things about California is we are a huge source of the nation's food supply. And so what happens here could have a ripple effect across the country. So suddenly legislative opportunities might arise. And then I would also say in states that have a ballot measure process like we do, because not all states do, I would urge them to follow the model that we have done, is get measures like this on the ballot and take it to the people. Because if the politicians are not going to do it, then the people need to do it. And I think this is one of those examples where people's natural, intuitive desire to know what's in the food that they eat and they feed their kids will take root across the country, especially if we win here in California. So I would hope people across the country help our effort in any way they can. Obviously, to compete, we're going to need lots of little donations that will add up to some of their big donations, our opponents, and then try to follow our model once we win here in California.
Very good, Zack. I'd like to thank you for your time and allow you, again, your final comments before we close this interview.
Well, I just want to say, thanks for having me on. Thanks for allowing me to make this case to anyone out there listening, because I do think it really strikes at the heart of a fundamental democratic principle, and that's people get to decide in the end, and people should especially get to decide what they eat and what they feed their families. It's a right-to-know issue. It shouldn't be decided by the pesticide industry or the junk food corporations.
Thank you again, Zack. Have a great day, and look forward to the results from the election.
All right, thanks a lot.
In November, is that correct?
Yes. November 6th.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
All right. Thank you.
You bet. Bye now.